do it.
Hi, this is Dave Belsky, your host. You're here on the Talented Cannabis Sunset Session, brought to you by Flower Hire. We have an amazing guest today who's going to share his story, Ricky Williams.
Hey, who are you talking to? Oh.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I mean, you've been out there a lot talking about kind of your journey to find, mental and spiritual and physical fulfillment, post your athletic career, which we'll get to. But let's start back. Not to college, you're breaking records. Not to when you start out in the NFL, we're getting 1,000-yard seasons. When did you really discover that cannabis was meant to be part of your life?
Discover or like come to terms?
When did you accept the inevitability that cannabis is going to play a big role in your life?
It wasn't until 2015. 2015, ex-teammate of mine, Kyle Turley, reached out and he invited me to speak at a cannabis convention in Phoenix. And at the time, I was living in Austin. I was going back to school to get my degree, and I said, no, thank you. I said, people here are not really like popular and I don't need that right now. I'm trying to do stuff in the community. And then I hung up the phone and I thought, I was kind of like bothered by that conversation. And I thought, everyone knows I smoke weed anyway. And so I called him back up and I said, I'll do it. Yeah? And something you said earlier, it made me think about this. As I was sitting on a stage talking to 200 and something people, and it was the first time that I was sharing my experience with cannabis. And it was such a cathartic moment. It was amazing because, even though I was a champion and I went through all those things, I didn't realize how much like shame and stuff was still kind of in there. And when I started talking about my story, after hearing myself share my story, I realized I don't have nothing to be ashamed about. And after I spoke, I was walking around the conference and people kept coming up to me and basically telling me, that I was their hero, that when I decided to walk away from the NFL, encourage them to stand up to their parents or their teacher or their coach and really own their cannabis use. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that I affected anyone with all of that. And at that moment, I realized, okay, this, I've tried to get away from it. I've tried not to face it, but this is going to be a part of my life. And from there, I just kept going more and more and more and more. And now I'm like all the way in.
Well, so like publicly, it was 2015. It was a call from your boy Kyle, and you spoke, and you're like, and you haven't stopped since, basically. Yeah. But when you started, like, really like using cannabis for your own personal reasons, like what was that moment where you're like, was it
honestly, it wasn't even, I wouldn't even say I was using it for my personal reasons, because part of the story is this, at least the beginning, is ambivalence around cannabis, because something that I'm experiencing some benefits from, but there's a steep price to pay for experiencing those benefits. And so I ended up retiring from the NFL in 2004 and traveling around the world. And one of the questions that I'm wrestling with at this time is, like, I just gave up everything and it's related to this drug or this plant. And it was important for me to make sense of that, because it didn't make sense to me. It was real. It was my experience, but I couldn't make it make sense.
You're like, the way that you were brought up to look at the world and your education, it really, it trip something up, and you're like,
well, it's education, but it's, even beyond education, right? It's every little boy's hero to be a professional athlete making millions of dollars and doing all this stuff. And for me, I'd rather like lay down, smoke weed, and listen to music. Like, and yes, that's our cultural education of, we're supposed to value hard work and all this stuff over feeling good. But I noticed for me, the most important thing was feeling good, because I realized if I feel good, I can do anything. I can accomplish anything. If I'm trying to break my back and force myself to do something, that just didn't work for me. So I retired from the NFL and I was wrestling with this question of like, what's going on? And I'm traveling around the world, in Fiji, Australia, like India, like wherever I am, random people come up to me and like offer me cannabis that don't have any idea who Ricky Williams is or any of that. And so I started to think, this is bigger than me. You know, there's something going on. And you know, I come back to the States and I decide that I want to learn about alternative healing. So I find a school and I start studying Ayurveda, okay? And I'm young and I'm just learning this stuff for the first time. So I'm flipping through one of the textbooks and there's a whole chapter on cannabis. And I'm thinking, what? This is a drug. And so it was really my first like introduction to an academic approach or understanding to cannabis. So when I say academic, I don't mean research in universities. I mean recorded knowledge over thousands of years, because that wasn't part of my education. And it was in the context of looking at it as an herbal remedy, part of a larger medical system that included yoga and meditation. And so, you know, interacting with cannabis in that environment, you know, in Northern California where the hippies were doing yoga every day, you know, it helped me like see how the two things are not separate, that they're actually, you know, they go together. And that's when that's when I knew that this was going to be a part of my personal experience.
Yeah, and well, the world has changed a lot in 20 years since you stopped playing professional sports. You know, you've seen some professional sports leagues stop testing for cannabis, and the world has definitely evolved. But you know, I shared a panel with Jordan Reed, you know, a couple months ago, who talked about like how important the plant was when he was having major surgeries because they were giving him opioids and having to take pills to even just practice because of, you know, the realities of being a professional athlete. You know, and cannabis can be a performance enhancer for professional athletes, and it can be a lot of things. Like what is a benefit of cannabis use for athletes specifically? Because you don't necessarily historically connect the two.
Well, first of all, I was victim of this. I don't think it's accurate or even like nice to separate an athlete from a human being, because the athlete is a human being. Right. And so the first thing is how is this good for a human being, and how can it help the human being achieve at whatever they're doing? That's more the way I think about it. In my experience was, because I think when we growing up, right, that what's going on outside in the world is what captures our attention, because we have to learn how to figure it out, how to function. And so in that process, a lot of times, at least for me, I became ignorant to what was going on internally. And when I started consuming cannabis, I started to be more aware of what was going on inside, so I can make sure that it was more aligned with what's going on in the outside. And I think that is going to help everyone. That has the ability to help everyone perform, whether they're a parent, an athlete, anything, you know, because even as athletes, we're all unique and we're all different. And how we use cannabis is going to be different. You know, as we do our inner work, what we find is going to be different, and how that affects us is going to be different. And a big part of why I launched Highsman is to start to be able to have these conversations, because most of the conversations around athletes and cannabis is about them getting in trouble for it. No one's ever asking, you know, wow, we really love what you do, and you're consuming cannabis. Like, tell us about it. Like, what do you like? How do you use it? How does it affect? You know, those are more interesting conversations, at least to me.
Yeah. Well, I watched an interview you did with Matt from Arcadian, another Texas boy, about you know, your second act and like what really you get joy from in terms of like helping people. You know, like describe to me like, you know, like your vision towards like helping people, and that being like your thing you wake up and enjoy doing every day.
You know, it comes back to what I was saying earlier about feeling good, you know? And I've noticed if I'm feeling really good and the people around me aren't feeling really good, that it really affects me. So, you know, if I'm saying it like that, it's kind of selfish, but I realize that I can only feel good if the people around me feel good. And first that's around me, like my family, but then it becomes around me like my neighborhood, and then it keeps expanding. You know, and eventually I hope that as, you know, the world improves, that I'll read the news, you know, and like it'll make me smile.
Wouldn't that be good? Right? We need some of that. Right? We need some of that. We'll make the world the news make me feel good about the world.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we? What I definitely want to talk about Highsman and the work you're doing. You know, with the brand and that company and that platform. But you know, how does I love your perspective on how does the U.S. how do people in the U.S. need to look at mental health and wellness differently versus what you've seen in other parts of the world. I mean, you've traveled, you've seen how traditional plant-based medicines have been used successfully by generations of citizens in other cultures.
Yeah.
Like what is needed?
Broader sense of what is meant when we say mental health, right? Because it's a catchphrase, mental health. And if someone, they're behaving in a way that you don't agree with, okay, right? It's a mental health issue, right? So, what is mental health? Is it I don't have problems? Is it that I'm happy and fulfilled? Is it that my anxiety is a little bit better? What is mental health? Okay, so
it's different for different people, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But even like the standard when we say health, what is healthy? I don't mean to get too philosophical, but
please.
But it's kind of what I'm saying is, in my opinion, you can't be healthy unless you have some spiritual or some connection to the whole thing. And in most of the healing modalities that I've studied, they all start at the same place. They say the number one cause of disease is not knowing your true nature. Not knowing your true nature is number one cause of disease. You know who you are and you can enjoy the process of the unfolding of who you are. To me, that's my definition of healthy. And I think, I feel like that there's so many people that are like anti-religion. Like you hear people say, I'm spiritual but not religious. I'm spiritual but not religious. And then when I hear that, I think we're human beings. We can't function unless we have some kind of belief system. We wouldn't be able to put anything in any kind of context. So we are all religious, meaning we have some kind of belief system. But if we're not conscious of it, then we can't live a life consciously that feels really good to us. And I think it's a lack of inner connection, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, that is the cause of, I think, of a lot of the mental health issues. Is that people are really most people are really atheists. They say they believe in something, but if you look at the actions and the way they live their lives, you think it doesn't check out. And if you don't have some inner connection with what you do to the surroundings, then I think it's gonna manifest as some sort of disease. And most of what people are doing are working, having a family, doing relationship, and I think a lot of that is to not deal with that internal anxiety of why am I even here, and what is all this for?
Yeah, well, there's a paradigm shift that needs to happen from a consciousness perspective. I do think cannabis, the cannabis movement, medical cannabis programs, recreational cannabis programs, access, it's happening at a very necessary time to help people look outside of the context of their own brain and try to see things in a different way.
It's what happened to be. I mean, I started smoking and I started thinking, am I really just a football player? And I got a sense of no, there's more. And I became curious to want to meet those parts of myself.
And you've been very, very brave though, not surprisingly, because you got tackled thousands of times
exactly.
in your life, but very brave telling your story of your journey. And now translate that into what does Highsman stand for? What is when you're the president of a cannabis company that's available right now in California and Oregon for customers, it's going to be launched for patients in Pennsylvania, for patients and customers in Massachusetts. What does Highsman mean?
It's I said this earlier, my vision as a football player, because I realized that I did a lot of damage to myself physically, mentally, psychologically, by forcing myself to fit into some kind of box work. And so my thinking coming out of that was, I would love for my job for me to show up and be myself. Right? So that's what I'm aiming for with Highsman, is that Highsman is about this message. I was talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson today. and we were talking about Highsman, and I said I'm trying to create like a community of woke potheads, you know, and we kind of laughed, you know, and then I said that are doing something in the world, you know, and I realized, you know, I'm definitely an introvert. Okay, I like my alone time. I'm very reflective, very insightful, and I think sometimes introverts, you know, people that enjoy cannabis in their inner world, okay, sometimes get a bad rap, right? And sometimes the world is so harsh, right, that we don't engage so much, and I'm trying to like do something about that. And I think if we can get together, have these kinds of conversations, and come up with creative ways to help other people feel good. And I think we're gonna. I feel like at the end of my life, I felt like I did something. And one of the biggest issues with football, I started thinking about the end of my life, and I was like, I don't think the amount of touchdowns or whatever that I've scored is gonna make a difference at the end of my life. And I need to be doing something that I feel does make a difference.
And you're doing that and more now,
yeah,
by telling your story.
Yeah. So you know, to answer in a more grounded way, a big part of Heisman for me is around this conversation of mental health, and for me, I've realized that the most fulfilling things I've done in my life, they weren't on the football field. They were about what I learned about myself when I was smoking, right? The things that I allowed myself to be interested in and to think about, and then to pursue. Those have been such rich experiences. And I think, at least for me as a guy football player, the way I was trained was to shut off the awareness to my feelings so that I can do the work. But cancer boon, right? It didn't work for me.
How did you tell me the origin story of Highsman, like in terms of connecting the dots? Because like building a cannabis brand, you know, it sounds like it's a bunch of, you know, Mediterranean after parties on a yacht with Lindsay Lohan and her crew, but it's like, it's not. It's like real work to bring a product to market and get it in the retail stores. Like, what's the origin story of like you meeting the folks out in the world that helped you create this new this company?
You know, there's details to the story, but most of it was really just like momentum. And I think a lot of my life happens that way, where I just feel like I have to do this, you know. And the first brand I launched in the cannabis space was Real Wellness in 2018, and I wanted my first thing in this space to really be about healing, and so combined cannabinoids and traditional herbal formulas, creating, you know, real medicine. And as I was out promoting that brand, you know, everyone was saying, "Where's the weed at? Where, you know?" And so I was thinking, okay, if I'm gonna step, you know, more into this recreational space, like how do I want to do this? And then I started thinking about my story, and a big part of my story, winning the Heisman Trophy in college, was I came back from my senior year. You were there. I came back from my senior year after. After leading the nation in rushing and scoring as a junior. So
yeah, to break the record for your fans.
Exactly.
Your home stadium.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
That's it.
Exactly. So I came back and I had big goals.
There.
Big goals. You know, I wanted to be the all-time leading rusher in college football history.
Did it?
You know, I wanted to win the Heisman Trophy. I had big goals, right? And I put all my eggs in one basket. Okay. So I come back to school, and the first 3 weeks are a disaster. Okay. I have a really bad game. My girlfriend leaves me for the quarterback. It's just like, it's bad. And I remember I was like getting down on myself, you know, I'm beating myself up and obsessing over all of this. And my roommate was like, "Dude, you just need to chill," right? And he brought out his little bong and he slid it over to me. And I wasn't much of a smoker at the time. Took a couple hits, and we're going upstairs to the loft and laying down, and just started thinking, you know. And it was the first time that I wasn't obsessing, in weeks that I wasn't obsessing about the game or the girl. And after like that died down, my mind started to think about the future and think about like how to get better and how to correct things and how to address it. And no lie, the next 2 weeks, back-to-back 300-yard rushing games. Okay, and that was the moment where I was like, oh, there's something to this state of mind that I could get to that allowed me to rise above my problems, look at them, come down, and be able to do something about them.
Yeah, I mean, You know, when I grew up in Austin, Texas, graduated from high school in 2000, and so was rooting for the hometown hero during high school. But I saw your pro career, and like they were, your last year for the Dolphins, they were running you as much as you've ever run.
Yeah,
and there was a lot. I remember this one game. Who the coach was like Wanstead, I think. Yeah. And you're like, Wanstead looks like he's got a heart in there.
Yeah, he
looks
does.
like a nice guy.
He does.
But all they could really do from an offense standpoint was give you the ball and let you run.
Yeah.
And like when you ended up leaving the game and for pod or whatever, I was like, you guys have been doing it for a long time. You just ran 40 freaking times a game in the pros. Like, you should be able to walk the earth and do what he wants to do. So much as I hated not seeing you play, I respected the decision, from that perspective, and then to like go out there and just learn and take all your energy and your focus and learn how to, lead a more fulfilled life, and now help other people lead a more fulfilled life.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it all worth it, and I think, hey, that's another thing that drives me, I feel, so I just turned 45, and there is something about being on the other side of halfway, it's either there's more to see when you look back, and it's like I feel like I've learned so much, and to make all of it worth it, I feel like I have to find someone to share it with, that hopefully I can help someone else find more fulfillment.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you're doing that here with our audience.
Yeah.
Keep sharing your story, and obviously, website for Highsman is
heisman.com. And another way, just to finish up and answering your question, is I view cannabis as a tool to help us become more aware of what's going on the inside.
I 100% agree with that. Like, I think the cannabis use, society looks at it like, is you're trained to look at like, I'm stoned, I'm a pothead, or I'm sober. And as long as you're self-aware of what cannabis does for you, it can really help you in your path on this earth, and championing plant-based medicine and your journey with it. Now, people may not have the same experience, may not work for them the same way it's worked with you, but it opens their eyes from the standpoint of like somebody who's done a lot, who they respect, who's chosen this path and is willing to share it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of an aside that this idea of being stoned made me think. So I have a 1-year-old at home, and so when my wife was pregnant, we were reading this hippie book, that was about home births. About home births.
Oh,
yeah.
No way.
Yeah, it was like. Did
you do that?
No.
Oh, okay.
She wasn't having that, but she was thinking about it, right? She had a couple of months, so she was thinking about it. When it gets closer, the reality starts to set in. And she was like, So reading this hippie book, and it was like these women who lived on a commune, and they were midwives, and it's like all these kids, hippies, had all these babies, right? And the way they talked about being stoned, it was a positive thing. Like they said, when the baby was born, the baby was so beautiful and so stoned, it was awesome. And it's just as time goes by, our attitudes change. But there is a time, at least for the younger people, that being stoned or being high, if you weren't stoned or high, people didn't trust you. The next generation, they're not going to smoke because all their parents are. The parents are smoking, so they're going to be onto something different.
Oh, the kids.
Yes. Amen to
but that obviously, I approach the cannabis world coming from a place of the people working in it, and it's like the fulfillment that you kind of talk about in terms of finding that path and really analyzing the world and making sense of everything that's happening and working on yourself. Like cannabis for the right person, like you, unfortunately or fortunately, you have to work in our society currently to support yourself or your family, but for the right person, it unlocks that like balance. The Japanese have a term called ikigai, right? Where it's like, it's this big chart, but it's like what somebody's good at, how somebody makes money, what makes the world a better place. There's an alignment, in the middle, like right? And that's what I think it is, for the people in the space that are there are easier jobs out there, right? Like starting a cannabis company, being an entrepreneur. I guess the last thing I'll
well, yeah, just startup life.
Startup life.
Yeah, it's real, and especially in something like this, where the regulations are all over the place, and
you got investors, and you got like
it's it's crazy, and I love it. Every day is a new challenge. We were talking about this earlier too. As a football player, it was like this, right? Every day there was a new challenge, and once I left football, I still had that intensity, and I still had that need. And I found starting companies really fulfills that. And I have a need to keep learning. And because, this stepping into business for the first time, I've been a football player my whole life. It's been a steep learning curve. And I'm loving it. And, doing this started in 2015. So 7 years, I've learned so much stuff. I can have conversations and hold my own and really understand like how to build a business, but also doing it while you're maintaining certain values. So it's been a beautiful process. And I think it's kind of it's an example of when all these things converge. Is I feel like, and I thought about this a lot. Like, what is my greatest value? What is my greatest value? And one of the things I came up with is that people will listen to me. I have a platform, and so I feel like I have to do something with that platform.
And what is it about, like, in terms of you making sure that like people that are, you mentioned when you talk about like you're the one beating the drum for the product, you're sending the messaging out there about what the product stands for, and you're also in charge of quality, right? I saw you on Today's Show.
Mm-hmm.
You're up in Humboldt learning from like the OGs of OGs,
yeah.
About quality cannabis and how to look at it. Like talk to me about putting a quality product in packaging. I think a lot of the brands that are celebrity endorsed have lost sight of the importance of that. Like, tell me about your approach to quality in terms of you make sure the people that are buying your products are getting a good product.
I think this is, especially taking that program, it really drove home for me like quality in being a connoisseur of anything. And I think the first thing is, to be a connoisseur, it has to be something that you love, right? Because that leads, I think, to the second thing is you got to spend time with it. And so in the Gautier program, what I really loved the in-person training is we had a nug, right, a sample, right? And we spent 2 days with that sample. 2 days looking at it, right? Looking at the
you got the monocle?
Yeah, so and smelling it, right? It's like 2 days with it. And then at the end of the 2 days, we finally, got to roll it up and inhale, right? And so when it's like a person, right? The more time you spend with a person, you really understand how to appreciate them. When you're looking at the trichomes and you're having these conversations and you're sitting in a room with other people that love this thing, right? It was magical. And so for me, quality is about the time and effort we spend in choosing the product, the time and effort and the attitude of the cultivators. It's all of that is quality. And I think, from a consumer, they have to trust, right, that they're getting quality, that they're getting quality from companies. And so quality is that we can show our consumers that we love what we do, and that love transfers over into their experience. And a big part of it for a cannabis company is the flower, but a bigger part of it for me is the consciousness from the cultivators all the way down to the way we think about marketing this plant. Right?
Yeah, I mean, well, the biggest tool that you have is keep sharing your story, your personal journey, what you've learned. Because it shows your consumers that there's something real behind it, and I guess last thing I got to ask, like, is Highsman hiring? You looking for talent? Like, if anyone out there is like watching, like, I want to work with that guy because I believe he would run a company the right way.
Ooh.
Is there any type of person that should go to your website and connect with Highsman to try to be part of the story there?
I think anyone that's hearing this interview and getting really excited, definitely, then Highsman is for you, because I'm trying to, really trying to build a community. And in order to do that, especially in the beginning, you need people who get it and are really passionate about getting this message out into the world.
Love it. Well, Ricky, thank you very much for coming in here today. Great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.